Chapter 1, The Science of Nutrition, Screencast 4. Now, this screencast is going to focus on the concept of assessing nutritional status. And what this really talks about here is a series of different procedures or assessments that help determine your nutritional fitness. These are the things that actually should be included in this type of an assessment. Family history and self-history, anthropometric assessment, biochemical assessment, clinical assessment, dietary assessment, and environmental assessment. So together, all of these components make up a complete assessment of nutritional status. Now, there are limitations, and I think it is important to qualify what these limitations might actually be. The biggest is that a lot of the things that you might see in someone experiencing a nutrient deficiency are not very specific. Take, for instance, diarrhea, skin conditions, fatigue. These are very, very vague symptoms and can be associated with a myriad of other problems not necessarily related to nutrition. So that's a real issue. Another really important thing to take into consideration is the length of time it takes to develop signs and symptoms of a nutritional deficiency. The perfect example would be osteoporosis. This is a condition that generally manifests much later in life. Let's look at postmenopausal women as a primary example. Yet, the history or the beginning of this may actually reach all the way back to teen years due to deficiency of calcium across an extended period of time. So it's important to keep in mind that there are limitations associated with these assessments that are out there. Now, the other thing is, who should you actually go to get this kind of advice related to nutrition? Typically, we see physicians and ideally a registered dietitian. That probably is going to be much better. Their training is specific to nutrition, and that's not training that typical physicians receive as part of medical school. They should conduct a nutrition assessment. They have the ability to diagnose nutrition-related problems, create an intervention, and monitor and evaluate progress. So probably the best way is to have a team made up of the physician and registered dietitian, because once again, a registered dietitian cannot diagnose. Diagnosis is something limited to a physician. So something to kind of keep in mind there. Now, here, what I want us to kind of take a look at, what are some health problems associated with poor dietary habits? I'm not going to go through all of these, but let's kind of take a look. So the first here is stress, and notice caffeine. Notice also the direction of the arrow. So caffeine increases the likelihood of stress. If we look at cataracts, now fruits and vegetables, they're going to decrease the likelihood of cataracts. So make sure that you kind of take a look at this particular figure, and it really will give you an idea looking at the risk associated with different food types out there. If we look at alcohol, alcohol or consumption will increase the likelihood of liver disease. It's also been tied into increased risk for breast cancer and obesity. So once again, there's a lot of different conditions here, but what should stand out is the impact that poor dietary habits will have on numerous health problems that are out there. Now, another important aspect here is the link between genetics and nutrition. Now, our genes, as well as our lifestyle and diet, will impact our health. Now, I think it's important here to realize that they don't determine everything. You have choice. So I think the genes may provide or result in some predisposition for a particular condition, but it does not mean you're going to get that. There are other things that you can do to modify your risk behaviors. Now, DNA is going to direct how the body uses the nutrients consumed, and this is due to the proteins that are coded for within DNA. Genes are going to dictate how nutrients will be transformed and reassembled into the body in various structures and compounds. Genes direct the growth, development, and maintenance of cells. Now, an individual's genetic risk of a disease are an important determining factor. Okay, not the only factor. I've kind of alluded to that already. And when we use the term mutation, basically you're looking at a change in DNA sequence that may potentially increase the risk of certain diseases. We know that there are some genes that are very much linked to increased likelihood of developing very aggressive breast cancer. So those are some of the things that we're talking about now, even though that's not necessarily a nutrition-related topic, but it is genetic in nature and tied into an aggressive health condition, breast cancer. Now, the family history is really important because this is one way to look at, is there potentially a genetic factor? And so if we look at diabetes, cancer, it could be breast, colon, and prostate, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and obesity. Okay, so there is a relationship between family history here. But this next statement is really critical. Heredity is not destiny. Individuals have the ability or can exert some control over how a gene is expressed. So, for example, if you know that you have a predisposition to heart disease, you can delay its onset by eating a nutritious diet, controlling your weight, exercising regularly, not smoking, getting the appropriate medical treatment. You are not doomed by heredity. Really important thing that we kind of have to keep in mind here. Now here is an example of a family tree, and really what they're looking at is overall the various family history of various diseases and basically the impact it has on longevity in this particular family. Now, genetic testing is now very, very a normal thing to do. And many of you probably have gotten one of those genetic tests that's advertised on television through Ancestry, or there's a whole bunch of them out there right now. Now, what a genetic test does, it analyzes a person's genes to determine the likelihood of developing different diseases. Now, these are going to be most helpful when there's a family that is definitely afflicted by certain diseases and there's that trend there. Recommended to have a genetic counselor, okay, to evaluate your risk first. And once again, the availability of at-home testing. Those are things that are readily available these days. Now, genetic testing can also help you be more proactive in protecting your health, but once again, you need to consider some of the limitations that may exist with genetic testing. It's not possible to identify all people at genetic risk for diseases. Genetic susceptibility does not guarantee development of a disease, and there's no way to cure a genetic alteration. You can only treat the actual health problem created by the alteration or mutation occurring at the gene level.